world where achievements and accolades motivate us to do more and be more, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there is more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old, push your way through, and claim the deeper life that's calling you.
That's where we excel.
We're your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren and
and this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Sit back and relax as we share the shortcuts we've uncovered to help you make shift happen. Welcome back to the Soulful Leader Podcast. I'm Maren and I'm here with Stephanie Allen, and we want to wish you the happiest of New Year's. We're super excited to be, we're moving into our second full year of doing this podcast. And we're so grateful that we have an opportunity to continue to share our insights with you, our listeners. One of the things that Stephanie and I were talking about was, especially going into a new year, how we think about life. You know, it's on a lot of people's minds and hearts right now, and it's on ours too. And one of the things that we were talking about is this concept of how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I love thinking about that as I go into a new year, because it gives me an opportunity to slow down and to make some space for possibly for some things that I haven't been quite aware of or that I've let slide. A lot of times we call them New Year's resolutions. I don't do New Year's resolutions myself. Not in the traditional way of New Year's resolutions. Many of you joined us for our 12 days of Christmas, and which is about to culminate in a few days. It's really an awareness practice. And so I think today we wanted to go more deeply into being aware as we go into this new year and new opportunity for ourselves.
Well, I think this is such a great opportunity. You talked about, like, not doing New Year's resolutions. And I think, like, at the beginning of anything, whether it's a birthday, whether it's a new year, whether it's an anniversary of something or a holiday, to be present to what it really means is actually why that's important, is like, that's how you'll live it. And I don't think we tend to look at how will I die, or when will I die, or am I doing enough? And we're either like thinking about the past, or we don't really presence how we want to really live in this world and be in a
Right,
relationship.
where we are right now. That's so
right.
true, Stephanie.
And to take a moment, and I mean a moment, as a practice daily, and just asking yourself, is this who I want to be? And cultivating, because that's what we're here for too, is like, we want to cultivate our most beautiful and best self. And it doesn't mean that you're not already beautiful and you're not always already amazing, because you are. But we have this opportunity to cultivate even more. And again, I'm not saying that you're not enough, because we already are enough. And what an opportunity. And I'm going to be really vulnerable in this podcast, because, in the last few months, I really have been going through a lot of transition. And it's interesting because it was leading up towards the end of the year and my yearly intentions of what I wanted. And it was really, really hard. And it didn't have to be, I guess. I mean, yes, it can be challenging and difficult, but sometimes, do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes you make things harder than they need to be. Like,
Yeah.
we suffer on the suffering, and we just kind of like, we talked about the poor sad tomatoes before. And I was like, I really kind of literally have been stirring with the poor sad tomato stories a lot. And sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes that's what I call it, you feel it to heal it, and you need to emote it. And I have been feeling it. And for most of my life, I've ignored that. I've stayed on the surface. of like, oh, I don't want to feel that uncomfortable feeling. So I'm just going to stay on the surface. And, here's what's interesting is that, again, how you do one thing is how you do everything. I want to be going deeper in my life. I don't want to just skim the surface of life. And at the end of my life, just kind of go, yeah, it was okay. I was just kind of on the surface. I want to know like what that deep dive is. I want to know what's in there. I've always wanted to know like that depth of who I am. And I really do want to know
So
the depth of another person. Always
I
have.
love this. And I just want to interrupt you. And I apologize. But I think that a lot of people say stuff like that. And I want to feel things deeply. I want to go deep into life. I want that richness. And yet when we're given the opportunity, we pull back.
Oh yeah.
Yikes, that hurts.
Most definitely.
That I don't want to feel that deeply. Or it could even be, oh gosh, I just read this thing. It's from The Big Leap. And it says, by extending your ability to feel positive feelings, you expand your tolerance for things going well in your life. So when I say we pull back, we don't just pull back from the hard things. We also pull ourselves back from the beautiful things and the like the that
Yeah.
we have to cultivate that ability to go deeply. And we can say it all we want, but this takes us back to where we were starting of how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you do things, if you stay on the surface,
Hmm.
no matter what your words are, you'll always stay on the surface. You actually have to do the thing and have a practice of cultivating going deeply, of being with the uncomfortableness of either extreme joy or extreme sadness or extreme whatever. Like, what would it be like to cultivate that?
That's an awesome question because it reminds me about my intention of what I want is a deep love. I want
Mm.
to know what real love feels like. And we tend to look outside ourselves, or at least I do, right? I've looked outside for relationships or jobs or stuff to mirror back to me that I am lovable, that I am loved. And how we do one thing is how we do everything. So I know that I'm going to give you an example. My ability to receive love is directly correlates to the ability of myself to be able to give myself love and to also
Mm,
let it in and trust it.
that's a
So
huge key.
it is a huge key. And so if I experience something, and just like you said, we tend to push away what's good in our life too. It's like, ooh, I can't trust that. Is it going to hurt? And I have to remind myself, it's like, wait a minute, I really do want to feel this. So who would I need to become to be able to be present, to allow that in? Because that's the key, isn't it? It actually, that question gets me to contemplate, like, I need to change. I We tend to want to change everybody else, but we don't want to change ourselves because, that would be too
It's much
simple.
easier, right? It's much easier to change everybody else, or so we
So we
believe.
believe, which is a total lie because it is not, and it's not even your job. So it's like looking at, how do I see myself differently? Because if I want others to see me, I need to see me. So I just recently, we had back in the fall, we had a hurricane, we had a tree come down, and it took a good 2.5, 3 months for someone to come actually and take down the tree because there's just so many trees down and you just can't get people to come and take trees down. So finally the tree came down and I had patio lights out in the back that were put up in the springtime. And how those patio lights went up was absolutely hell. My partner at the time was trying to put them up and he didn't want to do it. It wasn't a priority. It was my priority, but I wasn't tall enough or able to put them up without help. And so I recruited him, not really thinking about, his need. It was my need. And it was an absolute shit show. It was. I mean, the patio lights fell twice. They smashed. It was just, oh my gosh, it was hell. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, so now the lights came down for the third time now when the tree came down, right? And I'm like, okay, how do I want to be with these? Like I could go on about hey, look, they went up really angrily and distressfully, and they came down angrily and distressfully. And that is true, by the way. Like when we think of how someone enters this world and then how we live this life is also how we exit this life. So, I want to live rich and full. And I don't mean rich in the way of material wealth. I mean rich in the way of everything, like
Mm.
sustenance and love and passion and beauty. And like I want to be satiated with amazing, beautiful people and experiences and life. I really want to end this life being able to look back and going, wow, what an incredible life. I don't want to go, yeah, at the end of my life, yeah, well, I was safe and it was okay and it was good. And
Mm.
I want to be present to those richness. And that requires a practice. So, just reflecting back on, the transition of not being in a relationship again, losing that identity of being as a partner in a romantic way, and realizing that I've got lots of partnerships. I have lots of help and lots of support, and relationships are very, very important to me. So how I do one thing is how I do everything. How I treat myself, how I look at myself, how I speak to myself inside is also going to be not only what I do outwardly to all those I'm in relationship with, but also what I'm going to accept from others as well. So if I'm not happy with that, I need to change.
And I know going back to the lights, one of the things that I know because we talked about it before was that you made a conscious choice to change your relationship with those lights when you brought them
Totally.
down. Tell us
Totally. So
about that.
I'm sitting on the, there's glass smashed everywhere, and I've got 4 strings of these, industrial type, patio lights, and 18 of the little light bulbs are all stuck inside. And if any of you have ever, I see, I have this real thing too. I really don't like throwing things out. Not that I don't like throwing things out. That's okay when I'm done with them. I have an issue with buying cheap, crappy stuff and then putting it in a landfill. I'd rather go
Mm.
without for a long time and wait for the right thing that
Something
suits
of
me,
value.
something of value
Yeah.
that I know will last a lifetime. And so I do that. I usually go without for a long, long time, and then I buy something that is really high quality. So I'm not somebody who says, "Oh, I'm just done with that. I'm going to replace it and get a new one." I'm like, "No, these are good quality." So I sat down with my potato and my needle nose pliers, and it was disconnected from the outlet. And I attempted to get out all of these 18 little buggers that were all smashed in there. And my neighbor came over and she said, Steph, do you need some help with those? And I'm like, she wanted to put them up. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm taking them down and I'm putting them in the basement for the winter. I'll put them up in the spring. I might take you up on that. And she said, how you doing? I said, I'm feeling a little bit like these light bulbs. I feel a little smashed. I
Mm.
feel a little bit broken open. And I'm like, there's an example, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything. And the mirror of these lights that came down that just broke open for the third time. And I know, Maren, you can even talk about your power of three, that you wait, 3, and I'd love to hear about that. Because it is also the third time for me is like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with having the old way of seeing this. It's time for a shift. So I just sat down and I breathed, and I gently started going in and taking the light bulbs out, and each one of them came out so easy,
I
easy.
love that. The witness.
Yeah, the witness of like saying, I'm done with making this hard and smashing and aggressive. I'm going to be present with this and grateful. And boom, boom, boom. Each one came out easy. And I'm looking at that because I wrap them all up with care and attention. I put them away, and I'm like, I'm putting them away intentionally with respect so that when I bring them back out in the springtime to put them out, there will be care and attention. And by the way, I also read the instructions, which we didn't do the first time when we put them. And there is an actual easier way to do that. So it gave me this whole enlightenment, ha ha ha, with a string of lights. It gave me this whole enlightenment moment that if you take the time to be present and read about it and drop in to your heart and say, well, why am I putting these up? What does it mean to me? Why are they important? And not to be out of anxiety or fear, but to be in joy to do it, it completely changes the whole path.
It really does. I
So
love that story. I think it's so, it's a great story in and of itself, and relating it to our lives of how often we rush to do something just to get it done because there's an expectation, or we have an expectation for somebody else and it's not getting done the way we want it to. And then, it is a shit show through the whole thing, and then it ends badly and we wonder why. And that there is another option of like showing up differently to it and holding an intention. So at the end of last year, in December, actually December, I closed my studio doors for the last time. And it was a 14-year journey, and it was a beautiful 14-year journey with a lot of angst and drama and trauma, and as a journey is, right? And one of the things that I realized, because anytime you're winding something down, you, or I, at least, most, I think a lot of us, we do tend to look back at what are the lessons? What did I learn? What do I want to be present to? And one of the things that I noticed is kind of like your story of the lights is I started the studio with a lot of love and care and attention and a very clear intention. And when we wound it up in December, there was a part of me that thought, well, I'm moving on to something else. And, I don't want to get sucked into poor sad tomato stories. So maybe I just leave it. And it took me a long time to do the final video because I realized that I wanted to do it. I was being called, I was being so pulled to do it with attention and love and gratitude. And I was very grateful that I listened to that call, and I took the time and I showed up in that way. Because when earlier when we were talking about it and you were sharing your lights story, I had an enlightened moment.
those cute
that
lights,
those
just giving
cute
us lights,
lights.
lighting us up everywhere.
Absolutely. And that's what it's like, oh, this is how you do one thing is how you do everything. How you start something is how it ends. And we started it with intention. And it was, I mean, there's nothing that's just an easy, oh, it was easy. Looking back, it can seem like it. And in the moment, like through those 14 years, there was a lot of work and effort and sweetness and angst and all of the other stuff that was going on. And we ended it with love and compassion and gratitude and joy, so that it's a full wrapped up package, and it felt so sweet, and it feels complete.
Hmm. Hmm.
Kind of like you putting the lights away, and the next time you take it out, there will be love and gratitude and sweetness there. And I feel like that, of like, I put this piece away and it will come back out, all the lessons and all the memories and all the things, the places that I was allowed to grow because I was in that for 14 years. That's all going to come out and serve me as I go forward, and it will come forth with that same attention and intention.
Hmm. And I'm bringing this up. I think this is so great that we're all bringing this up right now because even as this is airing through the 12 days of Christmas, which we just came through. And if you're still, interested, I mean, today is October, so it's the 10th day of Christmas that this is airing. And this is important because as you do one thing, how you do one thing is how you do everything. When you get up in the morning, you can set your day. If you wake up quickly and like, oh my gosh, I haven't had enough sleep and I'm tired and I just want to go back to sleep and wah.
Or I'm
Right.
running late, I have to grab my coffee and run out the door.
Yeah, you haven't even taken a moment to breathe, to connect in, like, who am I? What is important right now? But if you give up, you're giving up your day, you're giving up your power. But
Mm.
if you get up and breathe and just take even 30 seconds to tune in to what kind of day do you want to live today? See, we tend to think of the big things like what kind of life do I want to live? Okay, well, that can be really like an all you can eat buffet. That's a lot to digest all at once. So I'm saying take those small moments. And I mean, even the day is a pretty big moment. You could just take the hour. You could just take
Mm.
this moment because it literally will change your cells. It will change the way you think, the way you receive, the way you send, the way you listen, everything, speak, everything. If you take just a moment to go, okay, let's reset. You have this power of three that I love. It's like when something is going off the rails for like once, you're kind about it. You're like, oh, well, that can happen. Second, oh, it's like, oh, there must be something really going on. But it's three times, it's a pattern. And it's like, okay, let's call it, let's name it. Because if it keeps going, now it becomes a habit and it becomes your destiny.
Or it becomes something that, you and I were talking earlier about our standards and how easy it is to let our standards slide. And I'll let it go the first time. And then I'll really notice it the second time. And the third time, I want to stand on it and
Yeah.
literally say, if it's a standard, then it doesn't continue, which means I need to look at where is the sliding, where is the place that's pushing up against that standard, where is it coming from and what is it asking of me? What does it
A-
want me to take a look at?
And getting awareness of that allows you to set a boundary.
Mhm.
And boundaries are important. And I'm still working with that within myself. And ultimately, the standards are from within of what it is that you stand on. But we also need to hold those inner boundaries in ourselves. And that's what, this actually just happened with Maren and I. And Maren called me on something. And I'm like, yeah, thank you for calling me on that because what you just called me on is actually of value to me. And I don't want to devalue something. So her calling a standard and creating a boundary allowed me to create a new standard and boundary too within myself to say, yeah, I'm done. This isn't, I don't want to put my life force there. I don't want to put my attention that way or in those areas. So being able to reset. And I'm bringing this back up again because when I look at it's always easier to look outside yourself at other things, right? So you can see, maybe you meet somebody in your life and they are judgmental or they're angry or they break things all the time. I have a lot of people in my life that break things all the time because they're rushing and they're not present. And for myself, I can look back and go, okay, I can understand that. I've been there too. And so I can make a little bit more space, have a little bit more capacity for them. But here's a perspective too, is how someone does one thing is how they do everything. So if you're seeing that in an outer life, you can only imagine how they are with themselves. If they're
Mm.
breaking things, they're breaking their own hearts, they're breaking their own promises, they're not valuing themselves. It's often a witness and it's not a judgment. It's like if we can come from a place of not shame, but out of kindness and go, oh, bless their hearts. And to call like what you did on with me, Maren, is that you called me on it because I am truthful enough to say, hey, relationship is important to me. I want to show up to myself, to another, and I want another to show up to me and I want to value it. And so when I had been late with you a couple of times, three times, you're like, hey, are you okay? Like, is this not working for you anymore or anything? You called me and so I'm like, oh my gosh, no, it totally is. But I'm realizing that I haven't made myself a priority. And I need to. I want to because I want to attract more healthy, functional, workable relationships that go, yeah, you're worth standing for stuff. And I'm worth standing for Stephanie too. So thank you. And I invite others to look within themselves too. And so be curious of how you do one thing is how you do everything.
I think this is a key conversation for the leadership side of all of us because having the ability and the willingness, it really starts with willingness to look at yourself and look at another. So when I was looking at this pattern that I was seeing in Stephanie, it the first thing I did was look at myself and say, where is it also happening in me? And then I approached Stephanie with compassion of not a what the frick are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? Because it wasn't something that was being done to me. It was can we look at this? Because something has shifted. She's
Hmm.
never I mean, like, both of us, we've both occasionally been late, and yeah, life happens. It's never been habitual, like literally 3 days in a row it happened. It was kind of cute. And so that's like getting curious instead of getting judgmental.
Right.
And the reason I say that this is important for us as leaders, not just as leaders of organizations and of businesses, which you can see the immense value of that, because then we don't shame the people with whom we're working. It's also the inner leadership of not shaming ourselves, of saying, well, okay, that's a pattern. I now see it's a pattern, and it's not a pattern that I particularly like about myself. So what's going on?
And it doesn't serve my intention of what I want. And now here's what I'm going to say with that too, because in the last little while, I could go into poor sad to man and go, well, I didn't show up because people are showing up for me and I'm such a victim. And I was kind of going there a little bit, to be honest with you. And I was being really hurt by some of the things that I was sharing and doing for, for people that are close to me and my clients or my team or my family or my loved ones. And it's like, I kept getting rejected. I kept getting, people not showing up for me. And so I was taking a moment going, where am I not, showing up for myself? Where am I not showing up for another? And that part of me that didn't want to look at it was like, oh, I'm perfect. I'm amazing. It's all about them. I'm like, okay, warning, Stephanie, warning. That's probably not at all true. I mean, let's go deeper because I want to go
Well,
deeper. See, I don't want to
I
stay
will
in the shallow
say
end.
you are perfect and you are amazing, and you have an opportunity to go
I
deeper.
haven't. Well, and that's what I say. There's nothing wrong with staying in the shallow end of the pool unless you want to do a deep dive. You're going to hit your head if you do a deep dive in a shallow end. And I want to do a deep dive. So I know I want to graduate into the adult big pool. Okay. I don't want to just be in the tots pool anymore. So I know I need to raise my standards. I know I need to have new boundaries. So sometimes, like what you said before, Maren, about, we push away the good things in our life too. So when you set an
Mhm.
intention, when you have the way you want to live or be in this world and it's growing and it's evolving, your standards and your boundaries have to grow and evolve too. And so it's not that you did anything wrong. It's actually that you're doing everything right because you've stepped up and stepped out of a comfort zone and it's going to require some new you got the training wheels off the bike. It's going to require some new balance, some new techniques, some new skills, and that takes consistent practice. And I was realizing that I'm in this new place and I've been struggling. A part of me's been struggling trying to practice a new place because I'm in a new place. I don't know how to practice. So I need to ask
Mm.
for help, and I need to ask for help from people who actually can help, not from people from my past that just aren't functional in the way that where I'm going. I mean, God love them, but it's like, we're not on the same wavelength. So, that's self-punishment for me to be able to, and codependent to be trying to get someone to do something that they're not capable, that they don't have within them to give, or they don't even know the skill or the way. It's like, no, why don't you find someone who's already got it? Who you can, an exemplar,
Right.
right? Like someone that you can mentor with or you can look up to and say, yeah, that person, they seem to have it all kind of ironed out. Maybe they might have a key for me.
Right. At least in the arena that you're looking at growing into, is
Right.
you want to find somebody who looks like they've like, okay, they've put work into that. They've put effort into this place. And so that's somebody that I could use as an exemplar rather than, somebody from our past who, or, that we look at and they're not where we want to be.
Yeah,
If we looked at that, just from a financial perspective of like, you wouldn't go and learn how to invest from somebody who has no investments,
that's
right?
exactly it. Yeah,
So it's the same thing with us, spiritually, with us emotionally. You don't want to go and learn from somebody who hasn't put energy and effort and time, has not invested themselves into those areas.
that's right.
Yeah.
So I guess, what Maren and I are suggesting eh, is for you to really look within for this year, for this upcoming year of like how you do one thing is how you do everything. And do you have even just a simple presencing practice? And what I mean by that is just to sit first thing in the morning and ask yourself, who do I want to be today? How do I want to live today? What is the quality that I need to practice embodying? And so that at the end of the day, you know, I can come home and I can look back and go, yeah, it could have been a struggle. It might have been a struggle today, but how were you with yourself? And just making that a daily practice and just one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time.
Yeah. You said it earlier. It changes our cells and it changes ourselves, but also when we think about the literal cells in our body, when we bring attention to who we want to be and start to change our patterns, it literally changes the neurons in our brains. It changes our cellular activity. It changes whether we have illness or wellness. The science is proven it. It's not woo woo. This is like concrete. It does change who we are.
Yeah.
And it has to start with small actions and then compound. That's how it works. Just like any other type of investing, if you invest small amounts and allow it to compound, eventually you end up really wealthy. And it's the same thing with our health, with our mental stability, with our, spiritual capacity, with all of it. So start with something small. And I think that the new year is a beautiful opportunity to say, you know what? I'm going to choose to keep resetting,
Hmm.
whether it's every day or every hour or every
Or every
month
minute.
or or all of the
Sometimes in those
above.
moments, it can be every minute, I got to reset, got to reset.
It's interesting because on my calendar, I actually scheduled a time for myself at the end of every day to do a review and at the end of every month to do a review. And that's my reset. That's where I get to go, okay. And it's not a judgment. It is an assessment. How did I do with that today? Okay.
Yes, an assessment with love. Like I get
Yeah.
to do this. I get to have a moment with myself to reflect because there's a cost if we don't. We do drift. And if and someone said to me the other day, well, what does drift mean? And I said, think about being on a river. And it's not like going with the flow. This is totally different. Drifting is just like being a cork on the river. And you get caught in a few eddies and sometimes you get caught in branches and you don't even know. But if you keep resetting, meaning you keep getting out into the middle of the river, you'll actually move into flow.
Mm.
It'll be easier. Like I said, it doesn't mean that there's not effort. It means that there's sweetness with it. There's more joy with it. There's more laughter. There's more play, curiosity, and wonder. These are the key elements. Like imagine having a life that is curiosity and wonder and playful and joyful. Like tell me that your health and your relationships and your life wouldn't be way richer. Like it,
Yeah,
it just would be. But it does take practice. It
it
does take
does.
practice.
Otherwise, like you said earlier, you end up diving into the deep end, but you're in the shallow end and you hit your head.
That's right. That's right.
You want to go deep. I mean, I think a lot of us, and especially people listening to this podcast, we're feeling called to go deeply, and we dive in and we hit our heads, and it's like, what's the practice that'll allow us to move into the deep end? And that's what we're talking about today. How you do one thing
How you
is
do
how you
one thing
do
is how you do
everything.
everything. I had a really wonderfully talking about shallow and deep end. And, I had a wonderful person say to me one time, they said, yeah, Stephanie, your standards are too high for the pool that you've been playing in. You've been playing in the toddler pool. It's
Mm,
shallow. If you want to have standards that deep, you need to jump into the deep end
mhm.
and learn how to swim. And that might take, having the water wings on for a little while or getting a swimming lesson or having a lifeguard on duty who can watch over you if you need help. It's like these are metaphors for our life. And yeah, it's like we have the opportunity. Why wouldn't we say yes to it? Why wouldn't we?
I love that. So I invite you all to say yes to this year and its unfoldment in the deepest way possible for you. We are so looking forward to the next year of wonderful, deep conversations with you. And we would love to hear your feedback. Join us in our Facebook group or our LinkedIn group, The Soulful Leaders. And we will see you next week on the Soulful Leader podcast.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslak. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.